Hello, Muslim friends of the world. That night, heavy rain poured down, soaking the narrow streets of the city's slums. The flickering neon lights from old shops reflected off the puddles, as if highlighting the darkness of a world dominated by the Shadow King's gang. The roar of motorcycle engines and the beat of hip-hop music echoed, signaling that the gang members had gathered in the old warehouse they had made their headquarters. In the midst of the crowd, Marcus King Ray stood with undeniable charisma. He wore a black leather jacket with a crown-shaped tattoo on his neck, a symbol of power that made his name feared in every corner of the city. His sharp eyes scanned every gang member present that night. "We won't let them take our territory," Marcus shouted, his voice echoing in the room. "The Iron Wolves gang thinks they can take our distribution route? No one touches the Shadow Kings without consequences." Cheers of support erupted from his men, but behind those cheers there was something Marcus couldn't shake from his mind. A feeling of emptiness that haunted him. At the peak of power and wealth, he felt trapped in an endless cycle. Meanwhile, Jamal, one of the younger members of the gang, sat in the corner of the room, gripping a gun with trembling hands. He was new to the world of gangs but had already witnessed unimaginable cruelty and chaos. Jamal had once dreamed of becoming a musician, but poverty and the influence of his environment led him down this path. He looked at Marcus with both respect and fear. As the night wore on, Marcus's orders were carried out. A retaliatory operation was planned to strike at the Iron Wolves' territory. Marcus, Jamal, and several other members set off in an unmarked black car, carrying automatic weapons and enough ammunition to start a small war. However, in the middle of their journey to the attack site, something unexpected happened. Their car was stopped by an elderly homeless man standing in the middle of the road. "Get out of the way, old man!" shouted one of the gang members, pointing his gun. But Marcus raised his hand, signaling his men to stop. "What do you want, old man?" Marcus asked coldly. The man, with a face full of wrinkles and a frail body, stared directly into Marcus's eyes. "Son, you can destroy this entire city, but you will never find peace. You are walking down the wrong path." Marcus scoffed, but there was something in the man's words that pierced his heart. He tried to ignore it and ordered the driver to continue. But throughout the night, the man's words echoed in his mind. Their retaliatory operation was successful. They managed to reclaim the territory taken by the Iron Wolves. But the victory felt hollow to Marcus. After all the chaos had ended, he sat alone in his lavish room, staring at a bottle of whiskey in his hand. He remembered his childhood, when his mother would recite prayers before bed, asking him to be a good man. But the harshness of life had led him down a different path. That night, for the first time in years, Marcus whispered to himself, "God, if you are real, show me the way." Morning was approaching, but the city still felt dark. Jamal woke up with a throbbing wound on his arm. The night before, during the retaliatory strike against the Iron Wolves gang, he had been hit by a stray bullet. Although the wound wasn't too severe, the blood flowing from it scared him. He didn't dare return to the headquarters, afraid of being seen as weak by Marcus and the others. Instead, he wandered the streets, searching for a place to hide. His steps stopped in front of a small building at the end of the street. A simple sign reading Masjid al-Hidayah hung above the door. Jamal, nearly losing consciousness from exhaustion, knocked on the door. Soon an old man with a white beard and a gentle smile opened it. "Astaghfirullah, young man. You're injured," the man exclaimed. The man was Imam Yusuf, a scholar who had lived in the area for decades. Without asking many questions, Imam Yusuf brought Jamal inside the mosque, cleaned his wound, and tended to him with great care. "Why are you helping me?" Jamal asked hoarsely. "You don't even know who I am." Imam Yusuf smiled. "Islam teaches us to help anyone in need, regardless of who they are." Jamal fell silent. Those words felt foreign to him. He had lived in a world where people only cared about themselves. After cleaning Jamal's wound, Imam Yusuf served him simple food and sat across from him. "Young man, you seem like someone carrying a heavy burden. What brought you here?" At first, Jamal hesitated to speak, but there was something in Imam Yusuf's calm demeanor that made him feel safe. Slowly, he began to share about his life on the streets, about the Shadow King's gang, and about how he felt trapped in a never-ending cycle of violence. "Every night I wonder, is this the life I want? But I have no choice. This world is harsh. If you don't fight, you'll be crushed, Jamal said. Imam Yusuf listened patiently, then replied softly, "This world is indeed harsh, young man. But the harshness of the world is not an excuse to lose your way. God created us with purpose. You just need to find that purpose." Those words echoed in Jamal's mind. For the first time, he felt like there was someone who cared about him, not for personal gain. In the following days, Jamal stayed at the mosque with Imam Yusuf, pretending he needed time to recover. During this time, he began to learn about Islam, about the meaning of faith, and about how Islam emphasizes peace, not violence. But even though he felt at peace in the mosque, Jamal knew he couldn't avoid his old life for too long. Marcus would surely be looking for him, and the gang world wouldn't let a member just walk away. Just when Jamal began to feel comfortable in his new life, a black car stopped in front of the mosque. Marcus stepped out with a tense expression, accompanied by several gang members. "Jamal, you think you can hide from us?" Marcus's voice echoed, creating tension in the air. Imam Yusuf stepped out of the mosque and stood in front of Jamal. Calmly, he said, "This young man is trying to find himself." "What are you looking for here?" Marcus stared sharply at Imam Yusuf. "We're not religious people, old man. We don't believe in all of this. But Jamal is ours, and I won't let him run away." However, something strange happened. As Marcus spoke, his eyes met Imam Yusuf's gaze. There was something in the old man's look, something deep and full of calm, that made Marcus pause for a moment. "Then why don't you come inside and talk for a while?" Imam Yusuf said with a small smile on his face. Marcus was surprised, but suddenly, curiosity stirred inside him. He waved his hand, signaling his men to wait outside. Then he stepped inside the mosque with Imam Yusuf. Inside the mosque, the atmosphere felt different, peaceful, calm, far from the chaos of the outside world. Marcus sat on the mosque's carpet, feeling a bit awkward. Imam Yusuf began the conversation, not with threats or sermons, but with a simple question. "Marcus, what is it that you are really searching for in life?" That question shook Marcus. He didn't answer, but inside his heart, something began to stir. Marcus sat in silence inside the mosque, his gaze fixed on the wall adorned with calligraphy of Quranic verses. Imam Yusuf's gentle voice echoed in the room, filled with a calmness that stood in stark contrast to the violent world Marcus was used to. "I won't preach a long sermon," Imam Yusuf said with a smile, "but I want you to know one thing, Marcus. No one is too far gone to return to the right path. Even a murderer, a sinner, or a gang kingpin, everyone has a chance to change." Marcus listened with a restless heart. The words were simple, but there was something that touched him deeply. For years, he had lived by the principle that power was everything, that violence was the way to survive. But behind all that, he knew he was just a man searching for the meaning of life. Yet his ego was still strong. Coldly, he said, "You speak as if I'm a child who needs lecturing. My life is my choice, and I'm too deep to get out." Imam Yusuf looked at him patiently. "Sometimes to get out of a dark hole, you only need to take the first small step. No matter how dark it is, light is always there if you seek it." Marcus didn't respond, but something began to shake his convictions. He stood up, ending the conversation with a firm tone. "I appreciate your time, but I have other matters to attend to." However, before leaving, he looked at Jamal, who was still standing in the corner of the room. "Jamal, come with me. Your time here is over." Jamal looked at Imam Yusuf with uncertainty, but Imam Yusuf nodded calmly, as if understanding that Jamal's journey was not yet complete. "Go, Jamal, but remember, this door is always open for you." Back at the Shadow King's headquarters, the atmosphere was tense. Some gang members were starting to feel uneasy about Marcus's leadership. They felt Marcus had become too soft lately, especially after the incident at the mosque. "Marcus, you're losing control," said Rico, one of Marcus's right-hand men, in a challenging tone. "We can't show weakness. The Iron Wolves are waiting for an opportunity to crush us, and now you're wasting time at places like a mosque?" Marcus glared at Rico but didn't respond immediately. Inside, a conflict was beginning to rise. For the first time, he began to doubt his own path. Jamal, who sat in the corner of the room, watched all of this. He knew Marcus was struggling with something bigger than a rival gang. Quietly, he began to plan something. He wanted to bring Marcus back to the mosque, hoping the light he had found there could touch the gang leader too. A few days later, Jamal found his opportunity. As Marcus sat alone in his room, staring blankly at a bottle of liquor that had not been touched, Jamal gathered the courage to speak. "Boss, I know this sounds crazy, but I think you need to go back to that mosque," Jamal said softly. Marcus shot him a sharp look. "Jamal, do you think I'm the type of person searching for religion? I already know who I am. I'm not a good person, and I don't want to pretend to be one." "It's not about pretending, boss," Jamal replied. "I used to feel that way too. I thought I was too dirty to change. But there, I felt there was hope. Maybe you need to hear more." Marcus fell silent. Jamal's words echoed in his mind. Before he could respond, a gunshot from outside the building made them both jump. The attack from the Iron Wolves came without warning. The warehouse that served as the Shadow King's headquarters turned into a war zone. Bullets flew and explosions shook the walls. Marcus led his men with the usual courage, but inside something felt different. As he watched one gang member after another fall, wounded or killed, he began to feel disgusted by the never-ending cycle of violence. Jamal, fighting beside him, was suddenly shot in the shoulder. He collapsed to the ground, groaning in pain. Marcus, seeing this, immediately ran to him and dragged him to safety. "Don't die, Jamal, don't die!" Marcus shouted, his voice filled with an unfamiliar panic. Jamal weakly smiled despite the pain. "Boss, this is it. This is what I meant. Our lives can't go on like this. You know it. I just hope you see it before it's too late." Those words exploded in Marcus's heart. For the first time, he felt fear. Not the fear of dying, but the fear that his life would end without meaning. After the battle ended and the Iron Wolves were pushed back, Marcus sat alone in his room. Jamal's blood still stained his clothes, and his men's words continued to echo in his mind. That night, Marcus took a step he never imagined before. He returned to the mosque, this time alone. With heavy steps, he pushed the door open and saw Imam Yusuf praying inside. Imam Yusuf turned, smiling gently. "I knew you would return, Marcus." Marcus looked at him, his eyes full of emotions he couldn't explain. I don't know where to start. I just know that I can't keep living like this." "The first step is always the hardest," Imam Yusuf replied, "but you've already taken it. Now let God guide you." The night was heavy with the weight of Marcus's decision. Leaving the mosque, his steps were slow and deliberate. His heart felt lighter, but his mind was still burdened with uncertainty. How could someone like him, a gang leader known for his ruthlessness, possibly begin anew? The world he had left behind wouldn't let him go so easily. When he returned to the Shadow King's headquarters, the atmosphere had shifted. Rico, his right-hand man, was leading a secret meeting with several members of the gang. From the corner of the room, Marcus heard their low voices, laced with rebellion. "Marcus has lost focus," Rico said to the others. "He's too busy searching for some right path, or whatever he's doing out there. If we keep letting this happen, the Shadow Kings will fall apart." Marcus heard everything, but he didn't react immediately. He knew Rico wasn't just after power. He reflected the unrest felt by many of the gang members. They lived in a brutal world, where weakness could mean the end of everything. Once the meeting ended, Marcus called Rico to his office. The tension was palpable when Rico entered, his face showing a rebellion on the verge of exploding. "I heard everything," Marcus said bluntly. "You think I've lost control?" Rico smirked. "I think you've forgotten who we are. This world won't let us change, Marcus. You know that." Marcus looked at Rico calmly, but there was strength in his voice when he replied, "We can choose a different path. I won't let our lives be filled with blood and hatred. If you can't accept that, you're free to leave." Before Rico could respond, the door slammed open. One of the gang members rushed in with a panicked look on his face. "Boss, they're coming. The Iron Wolves are attacking again, and this time they've brought reinforcements. We're outnumbered." The assault that came that night was the most brutal in their history. The Iron Wolves weren't just after territory. They wanted to destroy the Shadow Kings entirely. Bullets flew and explosions shook the walls. Marcus led the defense with his usual courage. But this time, something felt different. With every step, he felt a heavier responsibility. He wasn't just fighting to survive, he was fighting to protect those who still believed in him. But amidst the chaos, Rico revealed his true face. In a critical moment, he betrayed Marcus, leaking the gang's defense plans to the Iron Wolves in exchange for his own safety and a promise of new territory. The betrayal nearly shattered Marcus. Many of their men were killed, and their headquarters was badly damaged. However, Marcus managed to rally the remaining members and temporarily push the Iron Wolves back. After the battle, Marcus returned to the mosque, this time with wounds on his body and heart. Imam Yusuf greeted him with concern, but Marcus didn't speak right away. He sat on the carpet, staring at the wall adorned with Quranic verses. "I tried," Marcus finally said, his voice full of exhaustion. "I tried to change, but this world is too hard. They won't let me leave, and now those who believed in me are dead because of me." Imam Yusuf sat beside him. "Marcus, change is never easy. The path to truth is always filled with tests, but God does not give a test unless you are capable of overcoming it. You just need to trust in Him." Marcus fell silent. Those words felt both like a burden and a glimmer of hope. "You have two choices, Marcus," Imam Yusuf continued. "You can return to your old ways, or you can persevere on this path. You may lose everything, but you will find the peace you've been searching for." That night, Marcus made a difficult decision. He returned to the Shadow King's headquarters and gathered the remaining members. With a firm voice, he announced that he would leave the gang life behind. "I can't keep leading you into endless violence," he said. "If you want to continue living like this, that's your choice, but I will seek a better way." His decision sent shockwaves through the gang. Most members were confused and angry, but a few, including Jamal, chose to follow him. However, Rico, having returned after his betrayal, didn't stay quiet. He challenged Marcus in front of everyone, attempting to seize control of the gang. "You think you can just walk away from everything?" Rico shouted. "You are Shadow Kings. The world won't let you leave." Marcus looked at Rico calmly. "I've made my decision. If you want to lead, go ahead, but I won't come back." The conflict between Marcus and Rico ended without bloodshed, but with a bitter farewell. Marcus left the headquarters with a few who chose to follow him, leaving behind the gang life that had been his world for so long. Marcus stood at the threshold of Al-Hidayah Mosque, followed by Jamal and a few others who had chosen to leave the gang with him. The night was quiet, yet a storm still raged within their hearts. They had left a world that had once been part of their identity, but the path ahead still felt unclear. Imam Yusuf greeted them with a warm smile. "You've taken a difficult step, but this is the beginning of change. You are not alone on this journey." The mosque had now become a refuge for those who had fled violence. Under Imam Yusuf's guidance, Marcus and his followers began their new life. They helped clean the mosque, learned to pray, and started to understand the values of Islam. However, Marcus knew that life would not be that simple. One morning, Marcus sat with Imam Yusuf in the mosque's courtyard. In a quiet voice, he said, "I want to do something real. I want to atone for my sins, but I don't know where to start." Imam Yusuf smiled. "Change begins with helping others. You've seen the darkness of this world. Now use your experiences to bring goodness." These words sparked an idea in Marcus. He began organizing his group to help clean up the surrounding neighborhood that they had once destroyed. They started by repairing a park that had been used for drug transactions, removing graffiti, and helping young people avoid falling into gang life. Slowly, people in the community began to notice the change in Marcus. Some viewed him with skepticism, but others began to respect his efforts. However, this new life did not come without its challenges. Rico, now leading the Shadow Kings, felt threatened by Marcus's transformation. He saw Marcus's actions as an insult to the gang, as if Marcus was trying to prove their lives had been a mistake. In a secret meeting, Rico gathered his followers. "We can't let Marcus tarnish our name. If he thinks he can just forget everything, he's gravely mistaken. We'll send a clear message." The message came in the form of violence. One night, Rico's group attacked Al-Hidayah Mosque, damaging the exterior of the building and leaving a threatening message. Marcus, who was leading the night prayer with his group, heard the commotion. When he stepped outside, his heart broke to see the mosque, the place that had become their sanctuary, defaced. Jamal, standing beside him, said angrily, "We need to retaliate, boss. We can't let them do this." But Marcus shook his head. Number, if we retaliate with violence, we're no different from them. This is not the path we want to take. Marcus's decision to not retaliate frustrated many, but he remained steadfast. He knew that change wouldn't happen if they were stuck in a cycle of vengeance. Instead, he led his group in repairing the damage to the mosque and continued their work in the community. In the midst of this struggle, Marcus faced a greater internal challenge. One night, he sat alone in the mosque, praying with sincerity. "God, I don't know if I'm strong enough for this," he whispered. "I want to change, but my past keeps haunting me. Please show me the way." As he finished his prayer, Imam Yusuf approached and sat beside him. "Marcus, do you know why the prophets were tested so severely? Because those tests strengthen their faith. You are being tested too. If you persevere, you will become an example to many." These words gave Marcus new strength. He began to realize that his struggle was not just about himself, but about giving hope to others who wanted to escape the darkness. Days passed, and Marcus's efforts began to bear fruit. Young people who had once been involved in gangs started joining his group, seeking a new way to live. The neighborhood, once full of violence, slowly transformed into a safer place. Even some of the Shadow King's members who remained loyal to Rico began to question their own life choices. But Rico did not remain passive. He saw this change as a direct threat to his power. In a meeting with his men, he said, "Marcus must be stopped. If not, he will destroy everything we've built." Rico planned a major attack to eliminate Marcus and his group once and for all. But unbeknownst to him, the plan was leaked to one of the gang members who secretly admired Marcus's transformation. The member came to the mosque and warned Marcus of Rico's plan. "Boss, they're coming tonight. They've got weapons. It's going to be a big fight," the man said, his face filled with worry. Marcus nodded, but this time he was not afraid. "We won't fight them with violence. We will face them with courage and truth." That night, Rico and his men arrived at the mosque, ready to strike. But what they found were Marcus and his group standing in front of the mosque, empty-handed, showing bravery without fear. Marcus stepped forward, locking eyes with Rico. "You can kill me tonight, Rico, but it won't change anything. Violence will only bring more violence. You know that as well as I do." Rico stood silent. Marcus's words shook him. In an instant, he saw all the blood he had shed, all the lives he had destroyed, and all the pain he had caused himself. The battle never took place. Instead, that night became the beginning of something greater. For the first time, Rico questioned his own path. Marcus, not only having changed his own life, was now shaking the very foundations of the world he once inhabited. His struggle was far from over, but the light he carried was beginning to shine on those around him, even those who had once seen him as an enemy. After that decisive night, Marcus felt a profound change within himself. He felt stronger, not because of his physical courage, but because of the inner strength that was beginning to grow. The Shadow Kings did not attack the mosque, and more importantly, they did not continue the fight. Marcus felt as if he had written a new chapter in his life, one filled with hope. However, even though the physical battle had subsided, the internal struggles within the gang and within himself were far from over. With Rico still leading the Shadow Kings, Marcus knew that their future still depended on the decisions of many people around them. A few days after the incident, Marcus gathered some of his followers at the mosque. They spoke with high spirits, trying to convince others to change and follow the path they had chosen. But Marcus knew that many still doubted. Jamal, now a close friend of Marcus, spoke with passion. "We've seen how the world can change. We can make a difference, Marcus. But we have to stay together, supporting one another. That's the key to surviving." Marcus nodded, but fear still lingered in his heart. "I know, Jamal, but we all know who's still out there. Rico won't stop, and more importantly, there are many who want to see us fall." Yet Jamal smiled confidently. "You're stronger than you think, not just with physical strength, but with the truth we carry." Although surprised by the changes, Rico could not easily accept that Marcus had chosen a different path. He felt humiliated and began planning a greater revenge. He believed that if he did not stop Marcus, he would lose everything. Bringing most of the Shadow Kings, Rico launched a full-scale attack on the community Marcus had built. They came with full force, destroying homes that had been repaired, burning the park that had been restored and creating chaos. But Marcus did not retaliate. He chose to stand in front of the burning house, praying, asking God to show them the way. "We are no longer part of this world, God. We seek a better way." In the midst of the destruction, some former members of the Shadow Kings came to him. They looked at Marcus with confusion and fear. But this time, Marcus did not use violence. He simply spoke to them. "What you see here is not the end of everything. This is the beginning of change," he said calmly. "I know you're confused, but there is a better way. You can choose to be with us. If not, we will all be trapped in the darkness." While some still hesitated, several gang members began to feel something stronger than their fear: hope. They no longer wanted to return to the world of hatred and blood. They wanted peace, as Marcus had shown them. Rico, still angry and feeling he was losing control, finally confronted Marcus with a face full of vengeance. On a dark night, the two met in a quiet street outside the mosque. "You've defiled the Shadow Kings, Marcus. You will regret this," Rico threatened, his voice full of hatred. Marcus looked at Rico with a face full of relief, not hatred. "I haven't defiled anything, Rico. I'm just trying to save us all from a greater destruction. You can keep fighting, or you can choose to change." Rico sneered. "You think it's that easy? You're too weak, Marcus. This world won't change with just words." Marcus stepped forward, facing Rico with a peaceful expression. "Strength isn't just about violence, Rico. True strength comes from inner calm and the decision to choose the right path." Rico stood silent, his eyes wavering. For the first time, he saw into Marcus's soul, realizing there was more to him than just the feared gang leader. There was a man who had found peace, and that made him feel vulnerable. "I don't know what you're talking about, Marcus, but I do know one thing. I can't let you ruin what I've built." With those words, Rico attempted to attack Marcus. But this time, Marcus did not retaliate. He stood still, allowing Rico to vent his anger. At that moment, some former members who had followed Rico but had chosen to follow Marcus now appeared and stopped the attack. They held Rico's hands, pulling him away from the fight. After that encounter, Rico began to reflect. Something had changed within him, although he remained stubborn. Deep inside, there was a lingering doubt. Would he continue fighting for the world he knew? Or would he choose a better way? Days passed, and changes began to show in the community Marcus had built. Many who had once been involved in gangs now worked for the greater good, rebuilding their lives in a peaceful way. With Imam Yusuf's guidance, Marcus began planning a major project to improve their city and help those still trapped in a world of violence. In the midst of this process of change, Marcus knew his struggle was not over. Though the world was still full of challenges, he felt more prepared to face them, not with violence, but with the peace he had found within himself. A few months later, the Shadow Kings, once known for violence and fear, began to change. With Marcus' help and some members who chose to leave their old world, the gang transformed into a group that supported the community, helping children involved in violence find their way, and assisting those who wanted to leave a life of crime. Rico, who had finally decided to leave his gang behind, came to see Marcus. Without a word, they simply looked at each other, and in that glance there was a deep understanding. Perhaps both of them would continue fighting their own battles. But one thing was certain: they no longer fought each other. Marcus smiled, not because of victory, but because he had found a way to peace, not just for himself, but for everyone around him.